We live, baby.
Oh my gosh, hey.
Hey.
Well,
Yeah,
hi.
normally.
That's so
And
funny.
Pure is in the house. Yo, shout out to Pure for their beautiful mural. We gotta get you guys on the show.
Yeah,
Hi.
normally.
Oh my god, I just heard myself. Is that normal?
Peter, I think it came from you.
Oh.
If you're watching it live.
Yeah, I'm watching it.
All right. Well, let's get it started, Peter.
All right, what up, Rebel fam? We are here with you June 9th for an excellent episode where we're getting back to our series where we get into it with real entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry, you know, the real talk with dope people. Today, we're in the thick of it with the realest person that we could get for you guys today, Geraldine Mae Cueva. But before we get into that, I want you guys to smash the like button and subscribe if you guys like our content. I'm Peter, the Director of Knowledge. Let's check in with our co-host, or Jacoby. How you doing?
What's good, Peter? What's up, everybody? Beautiful day in New York with a East Coaster who turned west. Excited to talk to Geraldine today.
I know, I'm like jealous. I'm like, I wish I was in New York at the moment.
It's too hot right now. You don't
I'm the opposite. I'm from the West. It's not the West Coast. I'm from Colorado and then went to New York. And so I get it. You got flip flop.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah. All right, Peter. So what we got going on this week?
A lot of stuff's popping off as usual. But I wanted to bring attention to the parent company and their first investment in a social equity applicant in the Speakeasy Cannabis Dispensary, Josephine and Billy's. Josephine Baker and Billie Holiday were the inspiration. So it's a very jazz-like feel. It's a space exclusively for BIPOC women of color and allies. It's a pretty dope first investment. It really shows that they're really going for people who have a complete vision and established brand. So I think it's a super dope concept. These women are pioneers. They're mothers. They're really trying to pay homage to the past with Josephine and Billy. So I think it's great. I think it really sets a precedent.
So it's a license, right? Like it's a consumption license that they're investing in.
Yeah. So they have a space and it's a speakeasy vibe, but they focus on education. But they also have products. So it might be retail with the consumption tagged on. And so they're doing things a little bit different than other markets in terms of the retail. Like they're separating their products based on indication. The three indications that they promote the most are relaxation, anxiety, and sleep, I think. And so, whereas like most dispensaries, they'll have things like categories, like pre-rolls, etc. So there's a lot of subtle innovation and more so brand story and vision that was able to get.
How much money they put in?
The financial terms of the investment aren't disclosed. So whether they own 10% to 90%, who knows? We'll find out in time. Hopefully they're not being malicious or predatory.
I was just curious what the term
Yeah,
was.
hopefully. Yeah.
And it's an investment. The parent company invested, so that company is taking a stake. It's not a grant.
Yeah, it's a stake. They own something.
Got it. Cool. Shout out to them. Good for them.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I mean, we're definitely going to see a lot more investments come into fruition. But for our audience, as the cannabis entrepreneurs that you are budding and coming into, realize that it takes a lot of vision, a really good story to really get those investments. And that's definitely what I think Josephine and Billy's embodies. So up next, it's a topic that there's always been a lot of buzz, but we haven't really talked about it. And that is cannabis workers unionizing or joining unions that already exist. And the reason why this is so important is because given the status of cannabis, employers can invest into 401ks and things of that nature. So traditional benefits aren't available for workers in the industry. But by partnering with unions, they can find ways to give other benefits such as child care bonuses and things of that sort. And so,
what state?
This specifically was in California and San Diego. There's a Mally's and Ash, the dispensary chain, had their workers unionize with a local union. You know, they're like random numbers and letters. So I can pull that up if necessary. And yeah, I just think it's really cool. I think unionizations, unions across the state, across the nation, whether they're teacher unions or police unions or all the other unions, their memberships are declining and they're really going out the window. But in the cannabis industry, it's on the up. And I think that's really powerful for workers' rights, but also, again, in mitigating some of the detrimental effects of cannabis being scheduled the way it is and employers not having access to traditional banking and other methods of benefits.
I mean, obviously it's on the up and up in the cannabis industry because there wasn't a big enough base to really unionize until probably the last couple of years. But I was working on something else recently where, have you heard of like the Gini coefficient? It's like an economic term to like measure the distribution of wealth in a country. So you divide the country into like 5 different segments, and then you can tell the difference between like the bottom 20% to like the top 20% and everyone in the middle. Anyways, that same principle, if you apply it to corporations with like unions and stuff, that number is like drastically bigger now than it was like 50 years ago when unions had, you could probably argue they probably had a lot more power.
Oh, for sure. They had.
And so like the executives of a company make exponentially more than relatively than the workers of the company. And I don't think that's going to change. Not at all. They're better for worse, more for worse, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not going to do anything to income inequality, but it does a lot for the workers in the industry. And it does a lot for, a lot of these companies have diversity goals and things like that. And so they want to hire people of color and it's part of their licensees where they need language like that in order to get the license. And so if that's going to be the case, it's nice that they're allowing their workers to unionize to get them these benefits that they wouldn't normally have.
For sure. Absolutely.
And then finally, I want to talk about DC. So the Biden administration, so DC is unique in that Congress has to approve how they spend their money, whereas other states obviously don't have to go through that. They have their own assemblies and senates and such. But in Biden's budget for the year, he included a rider traditionally slipped in by Republicans that prevents DC from using their funds to establish and regulate a legal recreational cannabis market. And so he was obviously pressed about this because they thought, this is not going to be the case with local DC officials. But he wanted to include the rider, and that's kind of pissed off a lot of local DC politicians and small businesses. And while DC is not able to right now establish a regulated recreational market, they do have a medical market, and they do have this very strange gray market in which gifting is allowed. And so with that gifting economy that they have, there are benefits to it. So operators in that space, it's better that they don't have a regulated market.
Yeah.
So there's like positives and negatives. Yeah, the taxes are high, and with the gifting scheme, they don't have to pay taxes and such. So
that's starting to pop in New York. I just think the difference is everything already passed in New York. So the big players and even the small players that are going for a license, they will eventually win a license. It might take a year, it might take 2. But once there's large capitalists in the game, they're going to cut down on that gifting game. They're going to bring the hammer down and end that real quick. Whereas in DC, they've been doing that for like 5+ years. And small businesses are probably better if they don't go rec for that very reason.
Yeah. No, I mean, they have a small operator in the article, and that's basically his sentiment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
I seriously cannot consume nearly as much as you can every week. Not on a weed level. I actually meant on a media level. But maybe on a weed level. I don't know.
No, I don't
but I appreciate you distilling that for us every time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for that info. I was like, wow, I am like not. I heard about the speakeasy, but the other stuff, I was like, oh gosh, I need to read up a little bit more. So thank you, Peter.
Don't try to keep up with Peter. Don't try.
The industries, there's a million other things we could have covered, but I hope those are the most relevant to our audience. If you got value from it, comment, like, subscribe. I just always talk about that. 75% of y'all don't subscribe and watch, so just
let's get some subscriptions. All right, so let's get into it. Excited about today for many reasons. One of which is completely selfish. Like I'm just trying to like learn how to market in this game better, right? So excited for it. So we have Geraldine with us. You are from the East Coast, moved to California. I just want to.
I did.
I think you started in fashion. You have worked with so many cannabis brands, a lot of which I thought are dope for a while, and I had no idea you had anything to do with it. So just get me started. Like, how did you switch over from the mainstream to regular or to the cannabis industry?
Yeah, well, hi everybody, whoever's tuning in. I'm Geraldine Mae Cueva. A lot of you might know me as Gigi. So I'm born and partially raised in Brooklyn. Split my time between New York and New Jersey, where my parents live. But I pretty much spent, the bulk of my adulthood so far in New York. Originally working in the fashion tech space, meaning a lot of retail businesses that had emerged online, and were part of the direct to consumer market. I've worked with platforms such as the group buying site, Ideally, if people remember that era, flash sale sites, drop ship. I worked with Bonobos in rolling out their guide shop model, among other e-commerce businesses.
And what were you doing at this phase? You're like what were you doing for these companies?
A lot of the time, I basically was a merchandiser buyer. I've always loved product, and for the bulk of my career, I was in apparel. The categories just changed, whether it was like women's, and specifically within women's, there's so many categories from like outerwear and swim to lingerie, undergarments, and then I did menswear for a while, American made goods for a while, and stuff like that. So I've always been really passionate about retail, but I loved learning and applying those skills to the internet. So I kind of, married the two when I started my career. And, that's really where I got a lot of my, where the foundation of my marketing skills come from, is the fact that I am a merchant. At the end of the day, merchant, their biggest goal is to drive sales and to find the right product at the right price, so that it meets its right customer, so that it would buy. So my foundation from that way, it really informed me a lot as far as how I translated my skills to the cannabis industry as a marketer.
Okay. So you were working for tons of different mainstream companies.
Yeah.
But like what was that flipping point for you?
Well, I learned really quickly that I love building things from the ground up, but I would never, see myself as an entrepreneur. I think like it took me a while to really understand that I had like the tenacity and heart to be ballsy enough to like work with people that I really believed in. I think it was easier for me to believe in like a product or a platform and the people, And so I gave a lot of my time to that. After a lot of really stressful ups and downs when it came to my work, getting let go, just not finding the right fit, startups that ultimately gave up on their ideas. I found myself realizing that I actually consistently was doing really great work when it came down to it. But it was all stemming from myself, like the way that I visualize and envisioned retail and product and placement. I started to consider myself as see if like it would be possible for me to be a consultant, because at the end of the day, I was building all these businesses and they were not mine. And I was empowered by like the product and the people. So I started to just promote myself more as a consultant instead of just want to be, try to be in-house as a merchant. And ultimately, cannabis was something that I just loved, that I was consuming recreationally, not really understanding that it was also a healing tool for me, and essential for like my well-being. And when I got let go from one of my jobs in 2015, myself and a friend ended up just exploring what it would be like to be a cannabis brand. And we did it purely out of like, just our own fun and our personalities merging as like two Asian women that grew up on the East Coast, loved like 90s and early 2000s hip hop. Like we just grew up on like the swag and the flavor that we would see in the media. And she went to NYU, and then I went to Rutgers and FIT. And so like we ultimately met in New York, and we just imagine what that would look like. She went on to like start a sustainable sponge business called Squishful. And I was like, I think I'm gonna like keep digging into this cannabis space. And Instagram was a big tool for us, for discovery, for connection. And and I think like for me, I was like, wait a minute, as a merchant, I was discovering brands that were ancillary to the cannabis space, meaning they weren't necessarily plants or plant touching. They were just like tools that you would use to like live as a modern stoner. And I was like, wait a minute, if this is emerging, they're going to need someone like me that can categorically sell things together, put brands together, identify the category, tell a story. And I think in that process of me connecting and really like fangirling, like the enthusiasm I had for these brands was just like, I couldn't control myself, and it was really genuine when I was
okay. I want to,
brands,
like, how did you actually connect with these companies? Because you were, like, you lost your job.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going to kind of explore. Everybody explores, like you're on Instagram just swiping, right? But like, how did you actually connect with people? How did you
I mean, for me, it was really that simple. Like in that time period, Instagram was really having, a moment. And for us, like utilizing hashtags, and like it allowed us to find like-minded brands and people that were speaking the same language that we were, just elevating what the lifestyle of the cannabis consumer looked like, making it more sophisticated, making it more design focused. And I just felt like I was almost like a kid in a mall that was just like, oh my God, I found all the stores and all the brands that I love. And I would just follow them. I would see what they post. I would engage with it. I would write with it just from my own personal Instagram account. And before you know it, I was taking a lot of those I was paying attention to them like a merchant would, and just seeing what they were up to. And a lot of them were, startups themselves hustling. And at one point, one of those brands out of Washington State was looking for an intern. And I wasn't shy about, wanting to learn and what place I was at in my life. And I was just upfront about that. Like, I don't know what you guys need, but I would love a chance at being an intern because this is my background, this is my experience, and I believe in what you're doing and the way that you're marketing yourself to your consumer. And this is before I started really identifying the consumer really meant community. And I think that was the beginning of me really establishing myself as, I guess in some ways, a thought leader when it came to product, because my strong suit is actually really finding great product. Like I've been doing that since I was like 18 as like a young assistant buyer. And, you know, and then I became trained in the market to do it for other businesses. But I was doing it from a place of intuition and a place of like, well, what else is out there, and discovery, and like, and learning about, you know, I was piecing things together to create this like world that I felt like I fit into. You know, I was a part of the community as well, except it seemed like I needed to be the one to identify what they were. And then you know, in that process, I was like, oh, okay, well, let's find out what these brands need. And most of the time, the brands needed awareness or they needed sales. And I thought, okay, well, I love social media. So how am I going to support them in that way? And from my background at Bonobos, you know, Bonobos is one of the original menswear brands that was founded online, what people call digitally native. It was a digitally native brand, and it used their guide shop or their offline component, their showroom, to give people the experience of what the brand is. And, you know, in the cannabis industry, there were just these miniature pop-ups happening, like these gatherings, panels, and things like that. And I just started to show up at these things wherever I would see these brands sponsor or be a part of. And I think balancing my ability to engage with everybody in an authentic way online, and then intentionally saying, oh, I'm going to meet you at this event and like, let's talk or take it offline. It really helped me cultivate these relationships and ultimately find my way in terms of, you know, people were bringing me on because they're like, oh yeah, you speak the same language I do, and we need you. Like, so then that's how I ended up getting opportunities or creating, you know, feeling like I understood their problem and that I could offer a solution or strategy around that.
You had like a whole ass career in fashion.
I did.
And then in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, you know what, Bet, I've been on Instagram for a bit. I'm going to go be an intern, which is, I'm sure, quite humbling. But you then like came up with all of these relationships and stuff. So like, how did you take that situation? Like, did you move to Washington or you were purely digital?
No, I was purely digital. And, you know, I was so much like, I was purely like, I wasn't even made an official intern, honestly. Like, I just ended up meeting the acting marketing manager. It was a 2-person team, and then the CEO. And then they were like, we're going to task you with a project. And I would just give them the research that they were looking for and then just talk to the marketing manager. And I just loved what she was telling me. Like, I was like, oh my God, that's what you're doing? That's who you're in contact with? And I just kept paying attention to everything they were doing, following the same brands, connecting. And, you know, ultimately they had their own in-person event around the same time that I was visiting family in Los Angeles. And they were like, if, you know, we're just going to invite you in case, you know, we know that you're not out here. And I was like, actually, I am out here. So then I went and I was like, oh, okay. Like, there's people that like, they are all like, we're all thinking the same. Like, who are these people? And, you know, one thing led to another. I think for me as a buyer, you know, I had so many brand relationships across different categories. Like, in one time, you would be managing like 36 brand relationships, and you might not buy from them monthly, but you would engage with them at least quarterly, you know, and have a relationship with them so that you would get the best price on whatever you're ordering or whatever it is, you know, driving sales, or they would be selling to you and you would find a way to push their product. And I think being able to adapt and create those strong relationships, even when there were times where they were dormant, was really essential for me in cannabis, because I think a lot of people were just starting out and I would like find them and I would just watch them grow. And then at the same time, they would watch me grow, and we would just be interacting. And then when the time came and they were like, oh, you know, we have some money, like, you know, would you be interested in doing something like this? And I was like ready for it. I was like, okay, like, you know, at that point I did leave New York, and I went to California because I felt in 2016 California went recreationally legal. And in my mind and my frame of mind, I thought, okay, well, if this is happening in California, then like I better learn as much as possible from the state of California, because they are, you know, the state with a wealth of knowledge, whether it was like in agriculture and actually growing the plant, historically in equity and policy, and then also just creating the lifestyle. Like it's very apparent, like in California, that like weed is integrated in every type of community and culture, whether you want to like really
Sure.
see it or not, you know. And I think it just like it inspired me in some ways, I guess, for lack of better words. And I was like, okay, well, if I can see the different types of people that speak to these different kind of communities, then I can find the brands that I can place them and they could sell to these people. And it was over time, over the last like 5 years, that I actually see like, okay, there's actually like a little more to this, you know, as far as purpose, as far as social justice and consciousness around actually working with these brands, and not just marketing to market and just sell things, but to actually educate, empower people about their health or their well-being, and also just empower them about, you know, how this plant can serve their communities as well as themselves. So
I mean, you said a lot there, but I completely can resonate with the fact that there's a lot of like the cannabis industry and the cannabis world that exists that I'm like, But if you start like probing around, it's really easy to like find that community where you're like, oh, you do have the same values. Like, oh, we're on the same page. And I love that. And we could talk about that all day, because that's one of my favorite things about Revel. But we're going to run out of time of not getting like the meat of like what you're so spectacular at, which is the actual marketing of this. And you just like very casually like dropped a gem there of like, I was looking for consumers, and I realized that was community, and then you just kept moving. And I was like, hold on. So what are you talking about? What do you do today now that you've done all of this? And talk to me about how you actually go from consumer to thinking about community.
Okay. So, I kind of feel like I teed that up So I'm glad you took notice of that. So for me, you know, for me, like what's different about me as a marketer is not only that I have the merchandising background, but I really focus on community engagement and driving necessary conversations that need to be had. You know, I learned a lot about community through a client that I had that I stumbled. I guess I didn't necessarily stumble, but I worked with the house music artist, DJ, producer, Cascade, and I was supporting his team. I was supporting his team in rolling out the development of his what they called like their brand ambassador rep program. And I just want to say that the community was founded by a friend of mine who had passed away in 2016. And she had really proven to the artists that she had this power of bringing people together online through Twitter, Facebook group, Instagram, highlighting people in the community and who's in the community, and really figuring out ways where we could amplify the artist's message and what he was doing, the tours that he was having, and creating really like community driven moments with that. Right. So, you know, being this like club kid, like on the side of my professional life, you know, and this is like the first time I'm really like outwardly sharing this, but it taught me a lot, because like rave culture, clubbing, like all that stuff is very taboo for a lot of people, like I think it's very synonymous to like the drug world. And I was just like a lover of music. So all of that like heart that we all kind of like gathered together, and not just and like we all had, and it was empowered by our friend that built this community where we all felt like we were in a safe space, and we could all become friends like on and off the dance floor. I mean, the parallels for me are like they're there, like I saw that in cannabis. There were a lot of people that still felt that it was taboo. They didn't understand. They didn't know that beautiful products existed. They didn't understand that, certain things were out there, or that, you could experience cannabis and not necessarily get too high or be so stoned and unproductive, like that same like heart I had and the passion, I just kept I naturally started to find the same people that were carrying and were hustling in the same level and capacity that I was. And we all, wanted to connect and support and collaborate with each other. And somehow I managed to create that as a strategy for the businesses that I worked on. So, and when people bring me on, I do know that like I'm there because they want me to drive their sales. They want me to grow their business. They want me to open doors for them, whether it's with relationships or actual retail doors, or just conversations that they need to be a part of. And not for nothing, but I think because I came from New York and because I was in the startup world, it was just like no door could ever not be knocked down by me, because I just felt like if I could be consistent and loud enough and find the right people that also said the same thing, it wasn't just going to be me. And it wasn't, in the same way this dance community kind of grew, the artist's career grew. I mean, the same happened for a lot of these brands that I was like working with. Like there were so many ways that I could pair us together where we were not only amplifying each other's mission or product, but we were really like differentiating each other as well. And, I think the one thing I learned about being a merchant is, there are so many brands out there, and the best is when you can figure out how they can all work together on the sales floor. And for us in cannabis, Instagram is this like unspoken this unspoken sales floor where, people can speak culturally about how their product is integrated. They can speak, they can showcase their product and display how to use it, why to use it, what to do with it. And then you can also show the people. And I think that's what the world didn't really know. Like, who else is using this, right? Because the common mainstream idea around who the consumer is or who's in the community was just bastardized and not sophisticated enough to show just like the diversity around the people using the ancillary products or cannabis in general, So I think for me, knowing that there was like honesty and truth and like a real purpose and mission behind a lot of these brands and products, it was the same for me. Like when I was, supporting this music artist who I felt was like a great human being with like positive music and, uplifting music as well. And like the message there was also inclusivity, was like, community and love. And, I think that's the same goes for a lot of these brands that I work with. They're looking to empower people. They're looking for people that want to take agency in their health and their relationships and the way that they interact and move with the world. So, finding those people and then finding those creating those conversations with them, like I was able to amplify that with product and, and also have like a mission driven in the process, given everything that has happened lately and the amplification of just like people understanding the correlations between like the war on drugs and Black Lives Matter, and even to the point of, what we're still dealing with there, but also when it comes to hate in the Asian society, in the Asian communities, which I'm also a part of, So in doing so, it's like I can create I was able to see micro communities build into macro ones, and then also create and define what that looked like for these brands. And A lot of the time it was cross promoting each other and collaborating, and, you know, the connecting and the consistency there was really like my biggest commitment to the space so far.
Okay, so I want to make it like tactical so I can wrap my head around what you're saying. Let's say I have a small business. I do a handful of sales every month. And we have like 1,000, 2,000 followers. I might say I want to grow that, but to your point, I really want to grow my business. Whether that means I have more followers or not, you as a marketer, you tell me if that matters.
Doesn't.
Like, tell me, and let's assume I can afford you, and like we, you know, there's no restrictions here. How would you think about like approaching that growth for my company?
Well, you know, I usually start to ask people, you know, like when I engage with any brand, I try to look at, you know, why does their product matter, right? Like, what is it that this product, what problem does it solve, you know, like, and when I think about the problem that it solves, like, who does that touch as far as like the in the community, who is the consumer, right? And like for me, I think I kind of start with, I always want to look at who already owns the product, you know, who's already interacting with the product. What are in the same ways that I cultivated the level of super fan level for a music artist, I'm looking at like, who's like a super user for your product? Is there someone that is just like endlessly sending, tagging photos, writing you? Like, you can use social media to find that information. And I kind of am that person that is like, oh, well, I see this person talking a lot about it, right? So it's like identifying like who's the customer, and can we tier the customers? Is there a commonality around the customers that I see? That are we able to speak to the same one with one message, or are we like fine tuning the message with another? Or do we want to bring somebody in that can speak to a different kind of consumer? And so for me, you know, community building actually means like figuring out who's in the community first. And if you can bucket them, you know, like if you can see like in your first out, like you said, you had a sales of X amount, right? In that X amount, I'm looking at I don't necessarily always have to look at the data. I can already tell just from the back end of, you know, whatever platform you might be using to speak to them the most, whether it's like Instagram or Facebook group or even your email list, and understand like, okay, this is where they're coming from. But I think in the same regard, you know, you don't know how to speak to people unless you kind of get a feeling for who they are. So, you know, that even comes down to like, what are they asking you that you might not have an answer for, you know? And I think even that is a point of marketing too, because is it something that the brand can address? Is it something that you can solve as well with the product that you're trying to sell? You know, so I try to ask the teams that I'm on those same questions. It's like, what do you want to say to them? And what have you said? And is what you have said to them, is that something that has resonated with them? What was reshared, or what did they like about, you know, what you were previously saying? Because I think you can sell, like, I come from the world of like, you can build a business off of a bestseller and reiterate and iterate off of that one thing. And like, that is like the foundation of your business, and you can build from there, right? So like I'll use an example as like Bonobos, my favorite one, because they sold a chino pant to men. And, you know, it's a chino pant. You know, what's special about it? It has a curved waistband, right? So that's like a differentiator. And for them, like, the idea was that all men enjoy, like, they might not think that they want to be stylish and fit in their pants correctly, but the reality is you put them in those pants and then they see how their butt fits and they look good. You get like their wife, girlfriend, partner to look at them and they feel great. And I think for me, like, what's better than bringing somebody into a space and then showing them how good they look and then selling it to them in that one version, and then all of a sudden, you know, we have a winter version, we have another fabric version, you know? So it's like, I think when I work with brands, I really look at like, what's your bestseller? You know, like, do you have multiple bestsellers? And if you had 3 items on your menu or your assortment, like, could you iterate any of this? Do you make them in bigger sizes? You know, like, smaller sizes? Like, so I ask questions like that in terms of growth and scalability, but all of those things kind of stem from like really understanding like, well, who are you going to sell this to? What problem does it solve? And then, can we integrate the people that are using it into the conversation, or do we want to bring somebody else in? And, and that's where like the relationships come in, where, you're cultivating from a B2B side and you're bringing in influencers and stuff like that to speak for your product and to your product. So
I really appreciate how you broke it down to like a couple very basic things. Like you threw in some tactics, but like there's like
I tried my best.
There were some core things that are beyond
tactics. Yeah.
That like just figuring out who your super user is, like that's fantastic. Right? So many people try to be everything to everybody, and then you're just nothing. Right?
Yeah.
I'd rather 10 people just love what we're doing instead of like 1,000 people be like, yeah, they're cool. Like, yeah, right?
Exactly.
But what about so you from the East Coast, like New York, New Jersey coming online soon. I got a lot of homies that are small entrepreneurs, or actually low-key big entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Looking at the legal market, right? So let's say that I sell a product in the underground with some decent scale or whatever, but like, how do I think about bringing a brand into the legal market? Do you naturally think of going into product? Do you think about like, just walk me through your logic if I'm in the underground thinking about a brand for the mainstream?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, well, I knew firsthand and I experienced it firsthand. I could build a brand on any platform, on a platform, right? On a social platform. What you need is like, a message, like a consistent message. I know I'm sounding really like 101 here, but with cannabis, like it's like I feel, and maybe this is just because I'm in it, but I feel like a lot of us we all have the same message, right? So as a differentiator, I think like it's really important to speak to like who you are and where you came from. If you are a founder that wants to be in the forefront in that way, but maybe there's an idea or there's an idea within your business that is differentiating, then I would speak to that, and I think there's like different ways to do this. Like I think for us, for me, and for us as like a whole in the cannabis community, I feel like Instagram is still a very, very powerful tool. I've said this before, and there's like, I wouldn't have the relationships I do if I didn't have Instagram as a platform for me personally, because I really leveraged it as not only a place where people could understand like who I am and what I'm about, but people could actually see like what I could contribute, and for me being someone that's a community builder, I really feel like I contribute to 3 main communities. One being a woman, and I guess, and then an entrepreneur and in business, and then one being Asian, and then one being in cannabis. And I think like I constantly, as my own person, I speak to that all the time. And I think that authenticity that I have to speaking to my communities that I'm a part of and that I contribute to, I think is what builds trust with people with me. And I think the way that I've leveraged Instagram to even build my brands or any of the brands that I've worked with has been to let them to like look at what works with them, right? Like I think I try to be very holistic with all the brands I work with in terms of how they speak to their customer, whether they're on Instagram, in TikTok, email, and then like they have a website. Like I want all of those things to really be stepping stones to each other, or a place where they can interact with the content in a really genuine way. So if I were an underground brand going into the space, I would think about, what is there a platform that you might already be speaking to your customers? Because you said that they already exist. So if they're underground, do they have a mailing list? Do they prefer text message? You know, instead of breaking into something brand new, which ultimately we all have to have multi-channels. I think we've all kind of established that, you know, we should lean into these multi-channels and see how we can diversify our language around the same message. But I think if I was a new brand, I would think about, where do I want to exist? You know, do you want to be on Instagram where everybody else kind of is? I mean, that makes sense. Or do you want to just establish yourself on TikTok? Or maybe you're sharing information and it's only on Twitter, or maybe you have a private group and then it's only on Facebook group, you know? So I think like the more that you can cultivate one place from a really authentic, from an authentic place, like the thing is, like, people want results with speed, and the only way that you can get there is if you maintain a commitment and consistency with one channel, but you simultaneously try to scale into other places as well. And maybe there are ways to adapt certain content over. I try to get the teams that I'm on to adapt things, or, you know, shorten things, and then long form is one place, you know, so that the click-throughs kind of all match up. But I think that's a tactical thing as well, you know, because we actually have cultivated those multiple channels. But if you're brand new, find a channel that really you want to do. You know, don't force yourself. If you don't want to do TikTok, don't do TikTok. I'm not well versed in it, but on other teams that I'm on, someone on the team is like, oh, I'm going to explore that and I want to cultivate that. So what do? They put time towards that, you know? And if you're going to start new channels, be dedicated to it, because the consistency and commitment is needed in order for you to find the right people, and in order for you to get your message to really hit, you know? So I'm not saying post every day. I'm not saying post 3 times a day. I'm not saying to inundate people with emails either. Just like really do things that matter and that really align with like the core values of what you're trying to sell. Because for me, I always also ask brands that too. Like, are we going to be able to talk about the product? Are we going to talk about how to use it? And are we going to highlight the person using it? You know, like if we can figure out all those 3 things, then like it makes sense for us to move forward with something. But if it's not, if we're going to give up one or the other, and it doesn't make sense, you know? And I think why I think the brands that I've worked with have been really strong or consistent with it is because the product, at least for me, I feel like the product was really the strong suit, you know, like the product really served a purpose, and it really elevated the message, if that makes sense, you know? So I think it's important to also be like, you know, as a merchant, I say this to anybody who listens or is listening, like really believe in your product, you know? And those 100 people that love it, who have bought it again or told a friend, pay attention to that, because those are like the first people that you really want to have relationships with, like your owners, you know, your repeat customers. Like those are the people that I think you can incentivize, who without willing will like praise you and reshare and, you know, forward an email and tell a friend. And I really like, I constantly drive that message home, because it's really hard to fake love. Like it dies really, really, really easy. And you can tell, you know, so.
That's the bar. The super users. I mean, if you haven't heard it once, she'll tell you 2 or 3 times. Like it's critical. It's critical.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I appreciate all the marketing conversation, but I also want to make it clear that like you have a career and you don't sell weed, right? Like you sell a service to these other companies.
I do.
Right? So for this back part of the conversation, I want to actually understand how you run your business, right? Like you went and got that internship, then you built a couple relationships on Instagram, you got some consulting deals. Like if I have a service, maybe I'm an accountant, maybe I am a graphic designer, like there's opportunity in the cannabis industry. Everybody talks about the ancillary stuff, but talk to me like how your actual business runs, and to whatever level you feel comfortable being transparent. Like what's a day in the life? Like how do you balance your time, your customers?
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for asking this question. I think a lot of people ask me, one, how did I get into the cannabis industry? And two, how do I make a living? And like I said before, like I am a merchant at the core. So it's vital for me to make sure that these businesses grow. And I don't necessarily even have to see the sales report. I just need to know from them that like the work that I'm doing is making an impact and they can feel it, So as far as how I can say for anyone that is interested in wanting to get into the cannabis industry, know your skill set really in and out, what you love to do, what you don't want to do, and even think, if you can, what challenges you want to face. Because for me, I think going into cannabis, I was like, no, I do want to solve that problem, because like, who else is going to do it, right? And like, I found empowerment in doing that. And I think in identifying that for myself. And this has never been like rainbows all the time. Definitely took a lot of like communicating with myself, having hard conversations with teams, like letting myself out of teams, like, so this is imperfect, and it's an imperfect path and a non-linear path. But what I know has been consistent for me is intuitively, it's always asking myself like, what I'm actually good at, what do I want to do, and what I don't want to do. And then also knowing like, what's the problem I'm still willing and able to face. Because either way, no matter what job that I've ever had, I felt that there was always problems that I actually really do want to solve. And like right now, I feel like the problems that I really enjoy solving are identifying people's communities, building them out, and then driving their sales, and then making sure that in that process, they're having the conversations that they want to have, right? So in saying that, how I make a living is through, I would say I have three really main like services. I can support people with like sales strategy. And that's really specific. So if you're a brand and, you sell, it's kind of like doing the reverse of my buying role, except I'm more of like the distributor, I guess you can say. Like I can support brands in figuring out with them, like what doors make sense for them, like what small businesses, chains, align with the value of the brand and what they're trying to sell, because like for me as a merchant, I always want it to be mutually beneficial. You buying from me and vice versa, like you constantly buying from me again, and then us cultivating that relationship. So there's sales strategy, and then there's just pure like engagement strategy that's has a mix of, I think as a subcategory, I can help identify, where are points of the conversation that you need support in, or even who needs to be part of that conversation that could help amplify whatever you want to say, or even just content strategy. How do we leverage a relationship and an expert, an influencer, whatever it is, and then bring them into the fold to either utilize our platform, share the platform, and then cultivate that to drive sales. So, it's either content, engagement, or sales, like direct sales.
So what about
that's how I kind of scale my services depending on what a brand needs from me. I charge based on that.
So what about let's say I want to buy one of those services, but like content, like I might be wrong here, but you're probably not gonna mock up a whole bunch of designs for me, right?
No,
like, but
I'm
that's
not a
kind of
designer
part of
either.
something that might need to be delivered. So do you hire people like as contractors to go do that? Like if the client doesn't have it, will you say, look, I'll help you, but you got to go get that service on your own? Like, tell me like how that works.
Yeah, well, what's really so I feel like for me, I'm more like it's compelling for me to work with a brand that already has is beginning to create a presence for themselves, right? I always talk about the product, so I have to actually feel that the product resonates with me in order for me to like think in that realm of what they need and what that content looks like. So, but I say all that because me myself, as someone that's building community strategy within a brand, I have to do that also. And I think what makes me efficient at businesses is that I actually have real relationships with people, and I can call on anyone in the community if we need something, that I don't necessarily have to handle that transaction of payment. I will just tee them off to someone on the team and be like, hey, by the way, this person can speak about all these things. They make their own content. What are we going to offer them? You know, are we going to give them like an affiliate code? Are we going to give them a free product? Are we going to give them an opportunity to create a campaign with them where they will get paid for X amount of time? But I will say, and most people know this about me, like I almost always, like, it's really, I think a lot of people are willing to go to bat for me and trust me enough that they will just follow through with the association, and like they won't even think about what they're going to get paid because they'll know that the relationship is solid. And I think like I really take that to heart, because as much as I'm imparting community within the businesses and internal teams, like I really feel like I put the work in to cultivate these community relationships as well. And I really try to go to bat for people when I believe that they need to get paid. But there's no doubt people have done free stuff for me at any company that I've been at, or have taken discounts, like just because they understood. Like I feel very transparent about why, you know, like why I would position in them and why I would bring them into a certain conversation or a situation, you know. Like I don't think I don't sugarcoat that at all, you know. I think like, and I think because cannabis is such a collaborative space, people are willing to go and do a little bit extra just because they know that it'll be on the right platform, and that it'll be almost like an evergreen opportunity for them later that will repay, you know. So, and it's not to say that I've also brought in people and then I've just worked with them, and like the team has grown enough where like I brought on like someone that could do email, or I brought on someone that could just do, you know, something for 3 months that we would pay for, or is like an influencer that has like their own event platform as well as like their brand platform online, and made sure that person got a monthly retainer, you know, like, so that we're constantly building. And I try to be really intentional with that too, so that it's not like I'm just picking anybody. It's just like, oh no, we have a strong relationship. It has worked before, and it has grown from there, you know. So there are certain things that I feel like you commit to that are not, like, you aren't able to see the monetary return right away. And I feel like doing that due diligence, paying your dues, I think like that really helps in this industry. But again, like I said, I'm not in this to work with people that are trying to get out fast. Like they're trying to be successful and scalable, but they're not necessarily just trying to get rich, and you know, like right away. And I think I pick my brand in the same way, because I've done it before where I've worked with people that didn't care, and then what happened? They are like nowhere to be found in this industry. And so like, even if the money was like decent for like 3 months, it just didn't last, and that it's not as fulfilling for me. And those are not the businesses I ever mentioned. People don't know that I was behind that, you know, even if I just did copy, you know. And that's not even my strong suit. I can do, you know, I think holistically I'm doing marketing, but then every now and then I'll do like writing opportunities, or like place people that can do better writing than I can, you know, for those kind of things. But
I feel like that's been your game from the beginning though. Like you've been building relationships mostly because you just are someone that cares and likes to. That started to flourish into like business opportunities, which were, you know, good looks for you. But now that you have that opportunity, you have a client that needs a service, you already have a relationship with someone else that needs that. And it's like, yo, I'm gonna throw an alley-oop to my friend here. Always. I'm actually not gonna get any upside on it. Like you probably could sell that as a service and like take a 30-50% margin on their time, but you're like, nah, I'm gonna just throw it to my friend. They can take whatever they can do. I'm gonna be out of it. But your friends now trust you. They know that you got them forever. And then your clients are really more like your partners, and they trust you that, oh, if you say they're legit, they're legit. And 100%. You kind of have this like, you know, web of positive relationships, but like you say, you cultivated it. You put the time in, put the work in for many years, knowing that it wasn't going to pay when you didn't have a job and you were browsing on Instagram. But now, many years later, it's grown. I'm nothing but positive that it's going to grow exponentially more. And it's just like the positive work you put in and the good relationships have that long-term value.
Yeah, and thank you for saying all of that so, eloquently, because it wasn't always that easy, right? Because I think, coming as like I'm, Filipino American, child of like immigrants, and while my parents were successful in keeping in growing like a great life for us as children and as adults, obviously I had a college education as well. I knew that like I would not get far if I didn't like support other people. And I've been in these situations where I had been really supportive and not able to negotiate for my value. And I think now that I've been able to like speak up for myself and understand like, what value I actually bring, it's not like more recently, exactly what you said. Now I can tee up something and then just tell people like, oh, I just get a percentage off that order. Like I'm teeing you up to this resort that's going to like take in your products. And it's like something that they really like. I feel like it aligns. They trust me. They got introduced to the person, have that direct contact. And, it's just in the same way I had to cultivate my relationship. They need to do that as well to that relationship too. So I can just get something off the side. And now their brand has that extra relationship with that business. And I think like that's a powerful thing too, because now I'm getting in a situation where people are like, oh, what can we offer you? And sometimes I just ask myself like, well, what am I going to learn here that I want to learn? Is there a relationship that maybe I can bring in, or that this business can open the door for me to actually have? And then I cultivate it. Like I take full responsibility for some of the some of the relationships that I bring in, especially if they don't deliver on time or like whatever it is, and I just feel like I just like will eat the extra time that I take and just be very communicative to people about the expectations that I either will receive from my client or that I even have, and I think like I've learned to be a little bit better about that. And I've learned to really align like my energy with my time so that it was equivalent to the money that I was making or am making, and that's been the foundation of Art in Times of Chill, like my consulting platform. I at some point through all of this, I realized, oh, I'm not going to just be brought in-house to one place. I genuinely thought moving here in 2017 that like, no more, I would just be brought in somewhere and I'd be like a marketing director, brand director, or something like that. People were just like throwing me like these fun titles. And I was like, wow, never had like a title like that before. But ultimately I realized it made more sense for me to dabble and help a lot of different businesses grow. Because ultimately, because I was a merchant, I was speaking to everybody in a category. And, whether I call them plant-powered brands, or their wellness and well-being focused brands or community purpose-driven brands, at the end of the day, like the common person was me saying that same story and amplifying their messages in that way. And I think that message will die with me hard. So,
but what about like the tough situations where you put in a lot of legwork to have good relationships, quality people, but you're not perfect, right? There's some people that like that did not work out. Maybe they actually sucked, or maybe the client sucked, or maybe the two of them were great, but they just didn't like work out. So how do you deal with like a difficult engagement and keep that relationship?
Well, I think one thing that that also stemmed from my family or culturally is just like a level of like professionalism. Like I am definitely from the East Coast and I definitely have a feisty side to me. But I'm not afraid in this industry to be very vocal and tell people what my situations have been like. I've been on the receiving end of just like unfortunate situations. People that were not really, their brand and marketing was saying one thing, and then like on the backside, they were not actually aligned with the cannabis industry. And so things always happen for a reason. I feel like either I've been told to leave. Like, I'm not even going to pretend like that hasn't happened to me. And I've seen other peers continue to engage with these brands, and that's fine. If they ask me, why wasn't I there? Oh, I thought you were there. Like, I tell them, yeah, didn't work out. This is what happened in the situation. And like, I'm no longer there. But, people will run again. Like I said this earlier, but like, these are not my businesses. Like, I can only run my own platform the way I feel it needs to be run, and share the information that I know, and to be real and true to the people that I work with directly, make sure that they feel good with me, and that they feel that I'm communicating with them as best as I can, and like, I've even had like a situation personally where I didn't work for like the last like week and a half or two, because I had like a family thing. Like my family member was in the hospital, and like, I just couldn't even fathom like opening my laptop. And like, I had to just tell these people full transparency, like, I don't know when you're going to hear from me. Like, I need to make sure this person is in my family is like stable and out of the hospital before I even engage in or think of anything related to this business. And I think that there was like real respect for me to give me that space and time. And I think like, if I don't think that would happen if I worked at a corporate place or if I was anywhere else. But because we're in the industry of wellness, in a sense, I think people really take this stuff seriously. They do believe in mental health, and they do believe in giving the person that's, on the team, like that time and space so that they can support you. And I think I had to learn the hard way. Like, not asking for it was also one of my biggest problems too. Like being overworked and taking on way more than I could handle, because I was just purely, I think part of me was just hungry. And part of me also felt like there was, like, if I didn't do it, then like, who would do it, and I felt like it was an opportunistic move. So I had to like just pull it on my back, and I think a lot of people in this, and I don't think we talk enough about the burnout rate that we all kind of go through, because we're so hungry and because we want to do more and because we believe in what we're doing. Like, I feel like I've had a breakdown, like more than I ever had. But I think at the end of it, I like learned so much more about what I was able to withstand. And I think in terms of entrepreneurship, I had heard someone say like, it really is just a journey of self-love. As an entrepreneur, like, how much are you willing to take and put yourself into the fire of building your own business? And like, while I wouldn't, I didn't really consider myself my own business or like, a platform until like 2 years ago. I'm trying to really speak to that now and be like consistent with the people that I bring on to like my next phase of what this business actually looks like. So I can only be real with myself and hope that my stories resonate with people, because I know there's a lot of women out there that are both my friends and my peers that love what they do, are totally 110% dedicated, but like, really, we all have a problem with overworking ourselves as well. So, whether I'm a consultant or in-house person, I think that that's just something that, we all need to just be more conscious of for each other, because, we all will just do better work if we have a little bit of rest and our well-being is like taken care of as well. So
that self-love line is a bar. That's the bar right there. That really had me shook for a minute. I'm still processing that. And then I make myself suffer.
Yeah, and I think like people do a lot of different things when they, for love, right? Like, you can be like really crazy and go off the rails and pretend to be someone that you're not. But then I think when it comes to cannabis, it's really hard. I mean, at least for me, I feel like the whole point of it for me was like enlightenment and consciousness. So if I am consuming and it's just not sitting with me or resonating with me, it's really hard for me to like not feel like I need there's just that intuitiveness that I think that has carried me in life and in business. Whether it was like me going to these different like e-commerce businesses that were really like the wave and every time. And I feel like when it came to 2015 and my friend encouraged us like, hey, like, should we do this? And I was like, yeah. And then I just kind of found my own lane in like what we were building together. And even so, like that friend of mine, when I had a project, I brought her on. I was like, I don't know how to make a beautiful, Instagram. She was the one laying out the images and sourcing them. And then I would write the language around it. And so when people were seeing the brand and seeing that beautification of like, oh, this visualization of like the lifestyle of the brand, they knew that it was eventually they would know that it was coming from either my wheelhouse and like these people that I had like, that were my right hands, not even my pocket. They were like my right hands, but they just like didn't, they were doing their own entrepreneurship too. And they were just needing to make some money. And I was like, I would rather make the money with, like then, try to find like someone else and then not pay them too, So I just feel like that was in fairness, I think that that's how I've been able to grow with others as well. And I think people know that about me also because I'm always willing to put people on. I'm unafraid to give people contact information as long as I know that they're going to treat them with the level of respect that I feel that they will. Granted, I do have confidentiality things like with clients, so I don't want that out there. That's like I'm just sending out information, but no, I think if someone's going to ask me if I know someone or they already know that I know someone, I will try to clearly understand what their needs are and then make introductions. I'm never afraid to do that just because at some point I was introduced to somebody and then I made a relationship out of it,
You obviously have made a couple relationships out of those opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Jacoby. Yeah, it's been
so. Last topic, and thank you for staying on late. I was getting
no worries.
My team is getting me the back channel, like, bro, you can't hang up yet. So
Okay.
they're really enjoying it.
I have time, so no worries.
For sure, we appreciate it. The last thing I just want to touch on is your platforms. You've made a couple nods to like, yeah, I can't control the way that they're going to run their own business. I can only control mine, right? You got the podcast, you got the sessions. Like, I don't know when you sleep, but you make it happen. So like, just talk to me a little bit about the kind of things that you actually own, and operate. And also like, what's the point of them for your business? Like as a consultant.
Great question. And I'm glad that you'll allow me to share that. So, I jokingly, but seriously at the same time, call myself the Chilanthropist. I feel like I wanted to make something fun for me because like, all this is really fun for me. I can talk seriously about marketing, but I also love, the whimsical and unexpected that cannabis can be. I really believe, just like, Broccoli Report says, like Broccoli Report is like that cross section of business and creativity. And I think like I read that religiously because I feel like everything relates to me in a way that it has informed the way that I've created my multiple platforms. So with Art in Times of Chill, it's the name of my platform, my consulting platform. I tell people I build communities, I connect brands, and I drive conscious commerce. So in that same vein, it's like the brands that I'm cultivating relationships with or with each other, I expect all of them to be really purpose driven in that same way, where the conscious side of things is defined by, all the issues that are plaguing our industry or our society, I guess, in the same regard, because it doesn't just have to be with social justice. I mean, there's environmentalism and sustainability, as well as, just inclusivity across the board with just being able to create a place where when I say community, it means all types of people and we're welcoming them in that way. And when I realized that that's what my platform represented and the brands that I want to work with, I want them to represent that as well. I realized that I also wanted to just expand on my message and to also understand what are people talking about when it comes to well-being. Because as a marketer, a big part of what I do is just cultivating conversations, right? Like, I think creating connections, when you create connections, you build into conversations, and conversations lead to relationships, and relationships cultivate a sense of community. And with sessions, I founded that with another consultant in the space during the pandemic, and she's more an event producer, Bianca Limone, another New Yorker who moved to LA. She is the founder of Limone Creative, just to be very clear. I don't know if I said that. And she had experience in building events. That's how I met her, where like my brands were showcased and like I activated at her events. So we had a relationship in that way. In March 2020, she brought it up to me to be a part of, one of her clients' pop-ups. It got canceled. And then a couple weeks later, when the world was like shut down, she had suggested, should we just do like an online smoke session? And I thought, yeah, I mean, I'm not doing anything else, so like, let's do it. And then I think the consistency that we had with that, it became a place of like community and a safe space for people to just talk about how they genuinely feel. There were people that were quarantined alone, and they just looked forward to coming at 420 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like we offered it twice a week, which was really ambitious of us, but we did it for quite a while. And then by June, when everything happened, and everyone was just kind of scrambling in other industries to talk about social justice, and then in cannabis we were all really forced to look inwards and actually see like, okay, the reality of all of this stems from that from racism and from the war on drugs and communities being disproportionately affected. And so we had our first open conversation about allyship, and with the amount of people that showed up, we were like, wow, should we keep doing this? And so more people came to us and they were like, yeah, I want to have a conversation on Latinx and accountability, or white saviorism, topics that I personally, as a newly formed advocate or activist, I was like, wait, I need to learn this too. So let's just open up this platform for people to speak. And it was a different kind of panel because, and we didn't even call it that. We literally call it open conversation because we would just guide a couple of the questions or have somebody guide the conversation and then they would speak to it. But it was really fascinating how that grew. And then it was like a great place for us to just like really cultivate what it meant to build an online community around cannabis enthusiasts, because they weren't all industry people, but they were just people that like stumbled on us and were like, well, I'm interested in learning, and again, like I can't drive that home enough that like the educational part is like not just for the consumer, the community, but also for me, as a marketer. I can't like learn alone. And I feel like in order for me to have the conversations that I feel like I need to have, that I needed to create other areas or platforms or channels for me. So that led me to have a podcast. It was a spinoff of my other podcast that I had with Kieran Wang, who we had a podcast called Almost Chill, and she's the founder of Almost Consulting. And then I spun off my live stream series Amplifier Chill as its own podcast, because what I wanted to do was really share space for people of color or just communities in general to talk about their well-being. And for me, like my well-being was, cultivated with cannabis consumption. And I know that's not for everybody, but I felt like if I could show different communities and the way that they move and then they create practices and rituals, that it would add value to the way that I became a marketer in the wellness space. And so I have that. So Sessions is a conversation platform. Amplifier Chill is more of the podcast. And it's all centered around positivity and well-being, which I think are cornerstones of like who I am as a human being. And they're all centered around chill, because I feel like what's better than really celebrating what it means to have a state of flow or to have a state of positivity in your health or in your soul. So, and I think, and then and then one like kind of more passion platform that's is growing quickly for me is my Instagram platform called Men with Their Flowers. It was truly like a visual diary that I had. I was just collecting and saving images of that I had found of men holding flowers amongst flowers. And during the pandemic, I just like started posting more of it. And I realized that it was really resonating with a lot of people. And then I was like, wait, I can also just talk about cannabis whenever I want, in the same vein as like, cannabis is just another flower. And I would just like have tidbits there. Then during Black Lives Matter, I just only posted imagery of like Black men and their flowers, and talked more about what I was learning during, the protests, and just what I was learning in general, what other brands were doing. I was sharing that, and then just making it the caption. And so now I have an intern there who helps me, because I realized it became more of a, I wanted it to be celebrating more like inclusivity, and just really trying to harness redefining masculinity as, a place where, there's men are also tapping into their feminine side and the delicacy that they have within around their own femininity, but then, rewriting what that meant for masculinity and offering that as a platform. Because again, don't identify as a male. So I want to be able to like learn from people and give that to them, and then just like create a beautiful space in that way. So it's great for me to have these creative endeavors, because I feel like at some point I just like, it's as much I want to just be able to share the message that I care about, and and it's equally fun, and then hopefully it can be scaled in some way where we could share artist work, and and really just like normalize the conversation around cannabis, gender, and all types of things like that, that I'm also learning, and I want my peers to learn too. So
wow, I love it. The woman that's so good at building community, the pictures in her photos accidentally created a whole nother new community.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's just like a testament to your game, to how good you are at this. We got to
Thanks.
wrap it up. I am so grateful that you spent the time with us.
Thank you.
Sent multiple chats to Peter and Lulu, like, "Yep, we got to do that. Oh, we need to grab that."
Cool.
And I know a lot of people in the chat and in our community definitely value it. So if you guys got some value out of Geraldine, please like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, but even more so, join her community, see what's popping. She can be found at Oh My Geege.
Yeah, 2 H's. OHHMYGEG.
There we go. We put it in the chat for you guys. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. And for the people that are our traditional Revel community, next week we have a super interesting conversation. A gentleman named Corvain Cooper. I actually followed his story first in the news, then I got like in the Clubhouse bug. And then next thing I know, Lulu's like, "Yo, we're gonna have him on the show." And so I'm really excited to talk to him. He was doing some time for cannabis related offenses, and the Trump administration pardoned him in some of their final days. So very powerful story, crazy stuff. But I'm really looking forward to that conversation tomorrow or next week.
Sounds
Wednesday.
awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Once again, thank you, everybody. We literally couldn't do it without our community. We appreciate you for joining us, the Chillanthropist. And on that note, we're going to sign out. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
The pleasure is literally ours. You killed it.